back, boys and girls. Here's another segment of the Giggler treatment by Roddy Doyle. You know who this is. It's Rover. And look at these delightful little giggling gigglers. This chapter is named after my fridge because it keeps all my food fresh. Chapter Fridge. At the exact same time that Mr. Mack was heading for the poo, Jimmy Mack fell off a stool in the kitchen as he leaned over to fill his mouth with porridge. The porridge bowl flipped over and landed on Robbie's head. "Ouch," said Jimmy. "Me bum." "Ouch," said Robbie. "Me head." Billie Jean came into the kitchen. She was wearing big boots and snow goggles. She had a long rope tied around her waist. She was carrying Kyla on her back and she was sweating. Billie Jean was a mountain climber. She practiced her climbing every day by running up the stairs with Kyla on her back. She did this for 3 hours every morning and rested only once for 5 minutes in a tent she pitched in the hall. Really? Billie Jean wanted to climb the highest mountain in every country in the world. She had already climbed a lot of them in Argentina, Kenya, Australia, and lots of other countries. The first mountain she'd ever climbed was in Holland. Holland is a very flat country, and its highest mountain is only 10 feet high. It's so small nobody had ever given it a name. But when Billie Jean got to the top, she named it Mr. Mack Mountain, after her all-time favorite husband. Billie Jean, by the way, was the great, keep saying great for 20 minutes, granddaughter of Elvis Ugg O'Leary, the little boy who tried to keep the snakes in Ireland. The next mountain Billie Jean was going to climb was Blue Mountain Peak in Jamaica. She was leaving the biggest one, Mount Everest in Nepal, until the last. She wanted to wait until Kyla was older and then they would climb it together. Kyla was looking forward to it. All that running up the stairs on her mammy's back had given her a love of heights and adventure. "What happened?" said Billie Jean when she saw Jimmy on the floor. "I broke me bum," said Jimmy. She laughed. "There is a half an hour to go before school," she said. "Why don't you go out and play?" Jimmy forgot about his sore bum and ran out the back door. "Bring Kyla with you," said Billie Jean. "Okay," said Robbie as he rubbed some of the porridge off his hair with a tea towel. "Come on, Kyla." He put Kyla on to his shoulders. "Hang on to my hair," he said. "Abba," said Kyla. "It's okay," Robbie told her. "It's only porridge." They ran around to the front of the house and played with the burst ball. Kyla sat on top of the wall and pretended she was on top of Mount Everest. She was a good balancer, but just to be safe, the boys stuck wet chewing gum to the wall and put her down on top of it. She was very happy up there, watching the leaves tickling one another in the tree above her and her mad brothers playing below her. Robbie was the goalkeeper, and Jimmy kicked the ball to him. Robbie's hand missed the ball, but he caught it with his face. It bounced off his nose, hit Jimmy's elbow, and bounced again under an oil drum. "Ouch," said Jimmy. "Me elbow." "Ouch," said Robbie. "Me toes." The drum was upside down and heavy, too heavy for the boys to lift. It had been there for years, since long before the Macks had lived there. Mr. Mack said that it had fallen out of the sky and that the Wicked Witch of the East was under it. But the Mack brothers weren't sure about that. Anyway, the ball was under it now. "Now what will we do?" said Robbie. "Abba," said Kyla. "Good idea, Kyla," said Robbie. The boys ran off and got one of Billie Jean's mountain climbing ropes from the shed. They came back and tied one end of the rope around the oil drum. Then they threw the other end up over a branch of the tree. "Now what?" said Jimmy. "Abba," Brilliant idea. They lifted Kyla until she held the other end of the rope. She dangled happily, but she wasn't heavy enough to budge the bin. Abba! Mega brilliant idea. The boys gathered some stones and put them into Kyla's nappy. That's her diaper. She became heavier and heavier. As she dropped slowly to the ground, the bin was slowly lifted. There was soon space enough for Jimmy, and he crawled under the drum. Can you see the ball? Robbie shouted. No, Jimmy shouted back. Well, what can you see? A monster. Well, chapter 2,000,007. I'm not a monster, the monster said to Jimmy. What are you then? Said Jimmy. A giggler, said the even smaller than smallest giggler. Robbie grabbed Jimmy's legs and pulled them out from under the drum, and the giggler followed Jimmy. Hello, she said, and she rubbed her hands and giggled. Any second now. Any second now? What? Said Robbie. Your dad's shoe will hit the poo. Abba? Said Kyla. Rovers, said the giggler, and she came out from under the drum and stood up. Hang on a minute. How come they could see her? Aren't gigglers supposed to be like chameleons? Aren't they able to change color? Good questions. Yep, good questions. Yes, they are able to change color, but a few days before they meet the even smaller than smallest giggler, the boys had painted the oil drum purple, and the gigglers, remember, aren't very good at being purple, so they could see her clearly. She was bright blue against the purple drum. Abba, said Kyla. We put it there, said the giggler, so your dad would walk on it. Why? Said Robbie. Because he sent you up to your room last night, said the giggler. But he only sent us up for a minute, said Robbie. Oh, said the even smaller than smallest giggler. Abba, said Kyla, and the giggler agreed with her. Oh, yes, she said. It is a terrible waste of poo. Next door, Rover was burying his bone in the flower bed. Well, you're not getting your money back, he said to himself as he kicked muck on top of the bone. And it's not fair either, said Jimmy. We'll have to warn him. Abba, said Kyla. Good idea, said Jimmy, and he ran to get their mother, who was the fastest runner in the house. I have an idea, said the giggler. Rover? Uh-oh, said Rover in the garden beside them. He tried to be more dog-like. He chased a fly, he chased himself, he went woof woof and snarled at a pair of knickers hanging over the wash line. Rover! He heard the giggler's voice. Rover? It was a special call, like a dog whistle. Only dogs could hear Giggler's call, and all dogs had to obey when the Gigglers called, even clever, sparky dogs like Rover. But Rover wasn't going to give up. Rover! I can't hear you, he shouted. I got a cold. Rover, said the Giggler. Jump over the wall. I've got a bad back. I'll pay you 50 pence, said the Giggler, and Rover jumped the wall without bother and landed right in front of the Giggler. I take all the major credit cards, he said. Then he saw Kyla and Robbie looking at him. So, I can talk, he said. Have you got anything to say about that? No, said Robbie. No, said Rover. You're not surprised? I'm a dog and I can talk. We know you can talk, said Robbie, we've heard you. You're always muttering and giving out when you're digging. In your garden. Am I? Said Rover. Yes, said Robbie. How long have you known? Said Rover. Abba, said Kyla. That long, said Rover. I better be more careful. The adults might hear me. Don't worry, said Robbie. The adults don't listen. They just think you're barking. He turned back to the Giggler. So what's the story, Gig?
Mr. Mack's foot is heading for your poo. We have to stop him.
My poo, said Rover. If he lands in it, he'll never escape. It's the best poo in the business. It's super poo. He ran to the wall. Hop on, kid. And Kyla jumped down and onto his back. Hang on to my ears, said Rover. And he ran out the gate and headed for the train station. The Giggler jumped onto Robbie's back.
Follow that baby,
she said, and Robbie ran. Billie Jean ran out of the house with Jimmy on her back. Follow that Giggler, said Jimmy, and Billie Jean kept running.